Hi everyone, my name is Isabella Li. I'm the founder of Musicale. Recently, I had a great privilege and honor to sit down with Dr. Mia Chung, a faculty member at Curtis Institute. We started our conversation with her fascinating life story as a musician. Enjoy!
My journey as a musician was not a typical one, in the sense that, often concert pianists start at a really young age, like at 3 or 4. Now, people would say, well, you started relatively early. I was about 7 when I started officially taking lessons. And it wasn't until I was 9 that I recognized I wanted to really be serious about piano. And it happened because I actually watched a televised performance on public uh, broadcasting system, the PBS channel in Washington, D.C. It's called WETA, is the local channel. I watched Anna Maria Vera, a child prodigy who was the exact same age as me, play the Haydn D major piano concerto with the Boston Pops. And up until that point, I was really avid, sort of playing by ear and, yeah, taking piano lessons, but not that seriously. Even though I really loved music, I just wasn't as disciplined um, until I turned 9 and saw her play. And that moment was kind of life changing because watching her made me realize what was possible even at such a young age. So I started practicing 2 and 3 hours a day from the age of 9, just because of that program. And shortly thereafter, within 3 years, started playing concerts and participating in competitions and that sort of thing. Fast forward, when it was time to go to college, even though I was, really head deep in music, practicing, 3 hours, 4 hours a day, competing, playing concerts, it was really the central piece of my young life. Um, my dad had asked me to consider going to a more broad based, liberal arts oriented college. And so I had envisioned myself being at a conservatory for a while, but I did understand his concern that I be broadly educated, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful for his wisdom. Both my mom and dad, neither of them are in music. They're not musicians. My mom is in science at the NIH, and my father was a corporate accountant. And so um, there are no professional musicians in my family, and they were really advocating for a broad education. So when it came time to apply for college, I actually applied only to liberal arts colleges, to 4 of them. I ended up in the Boston area and thought about taking lessons at the New England Conservatory while going to college. I attended Harvard College. But instead, my high school teachers introduced me to a husband and wife team at the University of Hartford at the Hart School of Music. And it was there that I would take my lessons. Now, they were very old school people. And so when you mention like influences in your life, they were huge influences, as was my high school teacher. Mr. Manis, my high school teacher, and Ray and Ann Hansen, who were my college mentors, really shaped my perspective on what teaching can be. And that was because they were selflessly devoted to their students. I mean, I would go over for lessons at the Hansens' house in Hartford. I would commute from Harvard down to the University of Hartford, every other weekend. And they would give me lessons for as long as was necessary for me to get through all the repertoire I needed to get through. So it wasn't like 1 hour was up and, okay, your time is up, your lesson's done. I had hours and hours of coaching. And this was sort of the old school apprenticeship model. That was huge. And that has informed a lot of how I teach nowadays to my students. The world has changed, I will say, significantly. The world has changed because it's moving quickly. Teachers are worried principally about their students, but also alongside that about building and continuing their careers as performing musicians, and we all know that it's becoming an increasingly more difficult climate in which to make your living and to succeed as a performing professional musician. And so there's only 24 hours a day, 7 days in a week. And so often lessons are perhaps limited to a 1-hour session. But at the Curtis Institute, I really do try to make myself available for multiple hours to the students and whenever they need. So they are able to reach out to me at any point for coaching, and even during the summer. So I'm happy to do that, to be available to them, because my teachers made themselves so available to me. One of the things that I also found really impressive about these three individuals, Mr. Manis was a Bach specialist, and he always spoke about design and concept, like thinking visually of a design, orally of a design, and so he constantly harped on ideas and sculpting ideas and over in the context of a larger design. And then the Hansons really cultivated a love for sound color and technique that produces that sound color, as well as a love for rhythm, which I think is one of the most undertaught areas in piano pedagogy. I feel like rhythm, to me, it's the backbone of music making. I mean, people always think of pitch first, they think of harmonies, you know. When you're playing, you're thinking about hand positions and pedaling and all this. But rhythm is really the heartbeat of music making. Rhythm is the dimension that happens through time. It's an understanding of how time works, how you calibrate time, how you calibrate motion in a phrase, how you slow down. All of this gives you such a rich repository of possibilities. And so I really underscore that area of my students' learning because it tends to be under-leveraged or under-harnessed. So what do I mean by that? For example, when Mr. Hansen would talk about Beethoven's rhythms, it was always in terms of the kind of energy that you create with rhythm, right? Rhythms can be very limp, they can be very static and consistent, but rhythms are not machine-like. You know, it's not like playing with a metronome, which is often how we train early students to kind of keep a very consistent sense of pulse. Rhythm has to be internalized. It's a language and universe unto its own. And so dancing, you know, dance choreography, so this understanding motion is a really, really important part of becoming an accomplished musician and pianist. It's particularly the case because for us, it's so easy to depress a key. We don't have to change the direction of a bow. I mean, violinists actually are beholden to the length of their bow when you think about it, right? It's not just this, but their bow is what produces the sound. And so they naturally are, like gravity, drawn to an awareness of spatial proportions on the bow, which translates into sound rhythm, right? We don't have that accountability. We just depress a key and that's it, right? So we can depress keys fast, slow, we can take time. There's a lot of liberalism in the way, you know, we execute and make sound at the instrument. And so this is why rhythm is so important. But a rhythm that is connected to your heart, right? Because rhythms cannot be mechanical. It has to be emotive and affective. And so that is where the artistry is developed. How do you bend rhythms? How do you create flexibility? Rhythms on a page are just approximations of the kind of emotional energy the composer's trying to translate to us, because they have limited number of symbols to work with. I talk about that in the Waldstein Sonata. So we have to use our imaginations to know how to use rhythm well, but we also have to match that with a keen physical sense of rhythm. That's what the Hansons were supremely good at. And then moving forward, after going to college, I went on to grad school, and I went to Yale for my master's and then on to Juilliard for my DMA. And it was while I was at Juilliard that I studied with Peter Serkin. And Peter Serkin was an extraordinary advocate of careful listening. It's something that I've really had to work on for myself because I'm a very outward energy directed person and I'm an extrovert, which means extroverts don't listen to conversation as carefully as introverts do. But I would say that there are musical extroverts and there are musical introverts too, right? So I needed to become more of a musical introvert. All right, there's a musical equivalent to that extrovert-introvert personality disposition. So as a musician, I needed to be more of a careful listener to the sounds I was producing, what I was conveying emotionally. And I think this is something that cannot be underscored or highlighted enough. Cultivating careful and deep listeners in our students is really of primary importance, not just doers. Because nowadays we're really focused on production, right? In our capitalist world, we always want to produce, to show what we can do. I mean, college admissions, you name it, right? Everything is positioned and primed to encourage young people and teachers to produce. But production doesn't necessarily manifest in the growth of listening skills. You're just doing, you're making. But the question is, are you really listening? And so to encourage that, going to concerts, not just listening to recordings, because recordings are just highly polished, really refined and edited final products, and sometimes that include as much as 1,000 to 1,500 edits, for a piece. But listening to a live concert is a different experience, and that's where you really get to feel the energy from the communicator, right, from the person who's playing, and get to learn how they are using the context of the stage and the concert room, right, to convey their ideas and to connect with you as the listener. There's tremendous learning in that opportunity. Ray Hansen, my teacher, used to say, he grew up in Chicago, and his dad was an avid music lover. They used to go to the Chicago Symphony, to the Chicago Lyric Opera. They went to recitals all the time. Every week it was something. And he said he would listen to the greats, Rubinstein, for example, or Horowitz, or he would listen to, everyone you could possibly imagine under the sun. And he would watch how they produced sound, what they did with their hands, and how they approached rhythms. And he would be practicing these things in his pockets. He had his hands in his pockets. And while he was sitting in the audience, he would play and position his hand the way they positioned it, and sort of imagine, what does it feel like to play the keys with the wrists down low, or have it up high, or to, strike with a kind of force, right, that imitates what they did. And he said he couldn't wait to get home to experiment with those forms of attack, right? And he would create sort of images in his mind of like what these things were meant to sound like. So let me give you an example. He once told me, like, if you were playing something really quietly, he said, once I was looking out a window and I was trying to make the connection between quiet playing and snow falling. And he watched snowflakes fall from the heavens and land on the earth. But snowflakes fall miles. Even though they're subject to gravity, when they land on the blanket of snow, it's weightless. And he said, oh, that's the kind of pianissimo touch I want to produce, right? So a weightless touch, that soft sounds are not created by controlling, but by complete relaxation and weightlessness, just like a snowflake falling into a blanket of snow. It was these beautiful insights that he would share that impacted me deeply. After grad school, after training with the Hansens and also Peter Serkin, I really wondered, I had moments of great questioning about whether or not I wanted to be in music, simply as a concert musician. I loved that part of my training, but I also had lots of other interests which were fed by my time in college. I had a lot of other academic interests. And I guess my lifelong journey has been kind of a struggle to understand how I can participate in all these things. In other words, continue with all these different interests, and wherever possible, bring these interests together. So after concertizing actively for about 13 years after I graduated with my DMA, I was on the road a lot, playing solo, chamber, and concerto performances, giving them, that is. I was teaching as well in a college called Gordon College, a small liberal arts college. I had to find a way to kind of make these things converge and come together. And it was while teaching a course called Interpretive Analysis at Gordon College that I began to see how I could bridge my academic interests in music theory and history with my playing interests and performance experience. And this class, Interpretive Analysis, enabled me to do that. Is to just say, let's look at a score, let's study it, let's study a composer's emotional disposition and history, glean what their tendencies are, see what they're trying to communicate through the score, understand the design. Remember my teacher, Mr. Manis? And then translate those insights into the playing. Because often we as pianists, we're all about, getting to the playing. We can't wait to play, right? We just want to get our hands on those notes and produce those gorgeous sounds that were so inspired on the score. But there's so much behind that. And this is where the academic interests, I think, have really encouraged and helped my learning and playing of the music. So at Curtis, that's actually where I started teaching about 10 years ago. I moved from Gordon College to Curtis, and it was that course, Interpretive Analysis, that actually forged the way for me to teach at Curtis. I was invited to teach there specifically because of that area of learning and expertise. My work at Curtis has evolved, and Interpretive Analysis has evolved into other things, other courses, like a course called Pulse, which is an understanding of metric pulse, of physical pulse, and how we work with that as musicians. Again, remember my teachings from Mr. Hansen about rhythm. All stems from there. And gradually, of course, coaching students in solo and chamber music. So I feel like it's the best of both worlds, bringing together these two areas of academic interest and also of performance interest. My life has also broadened out even further. I feel like starting very precise when I was young, and then fanning out as my interests and my own understanding of who I am and what I like to do became more mature and precise. I feel like my interests have kind of fanned out. So starting off as a player, then moving to academic areas of music and playing, and now even further out to sort of social and community engagement as inspired by my faith as a Christian. I'm really committed to the teachings of Jesus Christ, and particularly to the idea of being a force for good, positive change here on earth, and to invest in those efforts that promote that. And so that depends on relationship building, helping others to flourish, encouraging areas of study that might help us grow and improve as a society. So back in 2018, I founded with some colleagues an organization called the Octet Collaborative at MIT. And this organization is dedicated to human flourishing as informed by the historic Christian tradition. And this is all about pursuing the understanding of what makes us flourish as human beings. And in Matthew 22 in the New Testament, and also in Deuteronomy 6 in the Old Testament, there is this central command. Deuteronomy 6, it's the Shema, it's the prayer that the Jewish community prays all the time, which is really to hear, O Israel, the Lord is one, basically to worship the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. And in Matthew 22, which is the Christian parallel to this, it's, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so it's this idea of integrating all of our faculties, our minds, our bodies, our emotions, our intellect, so that we can flourish as human beings. Because nowadays we're highly compartmentalized. We're highly siloed in our communities. We are constantly subject to capitalist forces that make us say, how can I monetize this? How can I make money off of this? But to the exclusion of all the other things that help us to be well-rounded, complete humans that flourish through the integration of all of our faculties. And so that is the work of the Octet Collaborative, is to discover together as a community how we can do that well and to promote those activities to the Christian community at MIT, but also to the general community at MIT and beyond. So that's sort of my story in a nutshell. But I will say there's one other huge area in all of this that I didn't talk about so far, and that's my family. I grew up in a very loving home. My mom and dad, and I have 2 older brothers, and we had a very rich life together as a family, but also in community in my church and with our neighbors in our neighborhood. And I've always had the desire to continue that richness in my own life as an adult. And so I'm married. My husband John and I have 4 kids, Nathan, Anna, Caleb, and Francis. And so I've devoted a lot of my energy, first and foremost, really to my family and to my husband and to raising our kids together as a team. And I've enjoyed that so much. If I have to impart any wisdom, if I have any wisdom to share about life in general, it's that you need to lead a life that is informed by many experiences and not just music. Because the pressures to produce in music are great, to define yourself in music, huge, right? But sometimes that boxes out or brackets out all those areas of life that are very rich and meaningful, like faith, family, community. But these are the areas that are incredibly generative. Like, they help us to grow and develop insights that are profound. And those insights then, in turn, inform our music making. And so I'm very much in favor of mentoring students so that they can be complete individuals, complete humans. In this way, they will flourish and be able to sustain their productivity and engagement with the world in a much more sustainable way. But they will also flourish